and starting the live stream.
Great, thank you. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Puget Sound Energy public meeting. We're gonna get started in just a few minutes. We'll be getting going right at 5:30. Thanks for being here tonight. Okay, Emily, everyone was let into the webinar, just confirming before we get started. Looks like there's 30, yeah, okay. Perfect, all right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So welcome, folks. Just want to say welcome to the March 20th Puget Sound Energy public webinar, where we're going to be focusing on how PSE plans for a clean energy future, how they also balance some priorities and plan for multiple possible futures. My name is Annie Kilberg-Smith, and I'm going to be facilitating tonight's meeting with my colleague, Emily from Triangle Associates. We're about to get started here with the substantive content and wanted to let you know first that we are recording this meeting and live streaming it on YouTube today. And it can be viewed right now if you'd like to go to that link, or after today, you'll see it as a recording in case you have to leave partway through the meeting or you want to share this with somebody else. Emily, if you don't mind sharing that link in the chat, that would be great. And as we get started, please know that we're going to be asking you all to use the chat and reactions bar to interact with us a bit today. We have a large group, so we would love to see some of your thoughts and reactions as we go. And PSE is really excited to be offering these widely attended public webinars. We are hoping to use the Zoom webinar platform to have an engaging experience, and just know that this is the second time we're doing this week, and then kind of the second round of public webinars in this format. So we always want to hear from you, your feedback on how this worked for you, and we'll have an opportunity for you to do that after the meeting ends today. We will try to get to as many questions as we can tonight as possible, and just want to encourage you to use the Zoom engagement features as we request it throughout the next hour today. And you can go to the next slide. I'm already seeing lots of thumbs up, so that makes me happy. Everyone's seeing how to do that and using them freely. So this is what your Zoom bar should look like. There are going to be a few ways you can engage with us tonight. First is the Q&A pod. So you can click on that and type your questions in there. Everyone will be able to see each other's questions and their names, and you can upvote questions that you want to see responded to. If you want to ask questions anonymously, you can go ahead and fill out the Puget Sound Energy feedback form online. And Emily, if you can put that in the chat. And then there's a chat function, which is also available. We ask that you use this really only for engaging peer-to-peer or engaging with us on the prompts that we provide tonight, for help on the technology side, or for sharing links. So any questions you have, please put those in the Q&A pod. We're really trying to keep those separate so we can cleanly and easily answer questions as they come up. And then note on the chat that you will need to take the arrow and drop it down and change it from host and panelists to everyone, to make sure that everyone sees your chat and not just hosts and panelists. And then another thing is you can use the emojis to react throughout the meeting tonight. Sorry, it's evening time already. And you can see already people are using thumbs up. You can use hearts, everything there. So please feel free to use that as much as you'd like. And then there's also a show captions function, which is down at the bottom of your screen, and you can choose this option if you would like to see what's being shared in English or have it be translated into another language. So to do that, you just go to the closed captions function, slide the blue tab over to turn on the captions, select English as the speaking language, and then select your preferred language for the captions to be translated into. Next slide. And then on this side, you're going to see some facilitator requests. And this is really how we hope you can gather in this space with us tonight and really conduct ourselves together as we have a productive meeting. So just really allowing me as the facilitator to guide us through the process. We hope that you can all engage with each other in a really constructive and courteous manner. Again, asking you to use the Q&A pod to share your questions or feedback. We also want to ask you to keep the questions focused on the webinar topics, really, so that our presenters can ensure the relevance and get you the answers that you're hoping to receive. And then PSE will do their best to answer as many questions as they can. If they do not get to your question today, please look for a response in the meeting recap that we'll be sending out. And also, there's another option to use the feedback form, which we've already mentioned. And Emily, I believe you've already put that link in the chat. So if you'd like to use that, please do. Or you can also email PSE at the ISP email address on your screen. All right, next slide. Which is the safety moment. So as I've been telling folks, I am a little bit of a self-proclaimed clean freak. So I get a lot of satisfaction from a well-organized and clean space. So spring cleaning tips are top of mind tonight. So first, we want to make sure that you're remembering to clear the clutter before you start cleaning to avoid tripping hazards. Never mixing bleach and ammonia, as that can be hazardous. We want to make sure that you follow all your product instructions and directions to keep surfaces and yourself in top shape. Watch out for wet floors. You don't want to slip on those. And then make sure that you're storing cleaning products safely in a place that's away from kids and pets and is nice and clean and dry. All right, next slide. All right, so for today's presentation, we have a couple folks from Puget Sound Energy and another one of my colleagues here to support. So Brian Tyson, PSE's Manager of Clean Energy Implementation and Planning, will be presenting tonight and answering questions. Ray Outlaw, Manager of Communications Initiatives, will also be helping with questions as needed. And then we also have Emily. This is wrong. We're going to have Emily here tonight from Triangle helping, and Virginia is not going to be here tonight. So that's who we've got helping with this evening's webinar. Next slide. And go to the next slide. So as for our agenda tonight, once we get through this introduction section, Brian's going to be presenting more information about Puget Sound Energy and planning for a clean energy future, as well as balancing priorities and planning for multiple futures. Their presentation is going to be peppered with opportunities for Q&A, live questions throughout the next hour. I'm going to be helping facilitate those. So please be patient with us as we flag those for answers or respond to them in typed answers. I'll wrap up no later than 6:30, and we'll get you out of here so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. As you know, PSE is doing a Visa card raffle for those that attended one of the two sessions. The other session was earlier this week on the 17th. The raffle is for $100 gift cards, and 3 winners are going to be chosen by email next week. So we wish you the best of luck with that. Next slide. And as I introduce Puget Sound Energy to get us kicked off, I'd like for participants to respond in the chat to a question by typing your answer. So what we would like to ask you is, what are you hoping to get out of tonight's webinar? And as those waterfall responses, excuse me, come into the chat, I'll ask Puget Sound Energy's Brian Tyson to get ready to kick off his presentation. As I mentioned, we'll stop for questions and we'll facilitate them in the order received. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brian to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Annie, and thank you all for joining us here this evening. Really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure you all are ready to get to dinner or maybe having dinner, watching the webinar. So just appreciate everyone being here tonight. As Annie mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit about how we're planning for the clean energy future. And we did a webinar back in the fall. And so the first couple slides are just a bit of a refresher for what we covered back then, especially for those who are new, who may not have been for that previous meeting. Then I want to talk about some of the priorities and some of the foundational pieces that we think about when planning for this clean energy future. And then in my third segment, I want to dig deep into the how, really thinking about how we plan for multiple futures. And you'll hear me use that term a lot later on. And as Andy mentioned, there will be lots of opportunities where we'll have Q&A, we'll have a discussion, and then we'll also get some feedback from you all in a few sections of the slides later on. But let's go ahead and dive into the refresher piece. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we start here, which is our Clean Energy Transformation Act, or also known as CETA. And CETA really has 3 core tenets, 3 core standards, which is to be coal-free, in our electricity portfolio by end of 2025, to be carbon neutral by 2030, and to be at 100% at 2045. So 100% of our electric supply will come from clean, non-emitting resources. And the reason we start here is because CETA really allows us to think about how we're going to plan for that future and the type of investments, the type of costs that we're going to have in order to move towards that future as well. So let's go to the next slide. Now, the other thing we have to think about in this clean energy future are the increasing loads and really the impact on our system itself. And so right here, you just see a graph that really shows a lot of the growth that we think is going to happen. And a lot of it is due to population growth, electric vehicles. I saw a mention of electric vehicles earlier. I know we'll get to that later on. And then an increased demand for cooling for commercial and residential customers based on some of the weather interactions that are happening today. These are all factors. These are all things that we have to be mindful of as we're thinking about that clean energy future. Now, some other things that we also want to be mindful of is when a customer or when customers decide to voluntarily convert from gas to electricity, those type of interaction, those types of actions have an impact, a direct impact on our infrastructure, and then on the investments that we make to move towards this clean electricity, clean energy future. So it's important that we think about all these different challenges, all these different factors as we move towards that future. Now, if we can go to the next slide, because of what I just mentioned, where you've got population growth and electric vehicles and customers may be converting from gas to electric, it really forces us to think about a more holistic approach to our system planning process. Historically, we would look at our gas system in one silo and our electric system in another, and we wouldn't really understand the interactions between the two. But now, as I mentioned, as we're moving toward this clean energy future, we really have to understand what those impacts are. So if a customer does decide to convert from gas to electricity, we need to understand what that impact is on our distribution grid, on our substations, things like that. If customers do decide, or if we have programming that increases rooftop solar for residential or commercial customers, that's also going to have an impact on our system, distribution, transmission, and our energy supply system as well. And so now we see that we have to bring together this integrated approach for planning in a clean energy future. And that's exactly what we're going to do in what we call the integrated system plan. And we're going to touch on that a little bit here. So if you go to the next slide, this integrated system plan is bringing together, like I said, the interactions between the gas and the electric side of our organization. But when we do that, we really want to break out in 3 different tiers how we're going to move forward in that future. So in this plan, what you'll see is a first tier, which is really the short-term actions in the first 4 to 5 years. What are the definitive, detailed things that we're going to do in the next 4 to 5 years? And we're going to be able to describe those in that plan. Then as you move out, you'll have less granularity, less detail in what we're doing in the next 5 to 10 and 10 to 20 years. But the purpose of doing that is that we want to be able to set ourselves up for meeting those multiple clean energy futures. So we have to think about the strategies and the plans that we need to put forth in order to enable us to really launch any of those short-term immediate actions that are going to come further on down the line. Now, I'll also say that this integrated system plan is an iterative process, and right now we're using information, the best available information that we know today. When we come back and do the next integrated system plan, we'll have more information, better information, and so we'll iterate on that in turn and update our plan when it comes to that point as well. But again, the plan really is going to cover what are we going to do in the short term, and then as we get further and further out into the future, what are the strategies, what are the things we can set up in place to make sure we're set up for meeting that clean energy future. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And this is where we just sort of outline what we're thinking in terms of a timeline. Last year was a lot of scoping, a lot of development of the data. This year, we very focus on the inputs. So there are things, there are assumptions that we need to put into our models that we've got to think about before we start the analysis, before we start that evaluation. And once we get done with that, next year is really going to be focused on developing that plan. And so that's writing that actual report, that book, talking about those specific actions that I talked about, those strategies I mentioned in the 5 to 10 year time frame. That's what we want to really be focused on next year as we get ready for our filing in 2027. And once we do the filing, we'll look to our state regulator, the Washington UTC, for a review and a formal approval of that plan once we get that filed in 2027. So again, we're starting at a point where we're looking at CETA, we're looking at the investments that may be required for meeting CETA. We're also thinking about the increase in our load, increase in our demand, and a lot of the customer behaviors and how that has an impact on our investments. And we see that because of those interactions, because of those potential investments, we're really looking at integrating our gas and electric planning processes to come to one holistic integrated system plan. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and see if there's any questions we've got.
Thanks, Brian. So give a moment to Brian here and ask him any questions that might have come up during that section. I do see one that's getting typed, so we won't go into that. But any other questions? Okay. Actually, why don't we go ahead and have Brian answer that one? So, question from Dennis says, are there any future plans to encourage EV bi-directional charging?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dennis. That is something we're exploring. We're not fully there in launching that technology, but that is something we're definitely fully exploring. And we consider electric vehicle growth when we do this planning process. And I think we'll touch on that a little later on. But yes, that's something we're mindful of.
Thank you. And I just wanted to give a reminder to participants tonight, when you are putting items in the chat, just make sure you are clicking the to button and to everyone instead of just hosts and panelists. I'm seeing a couple things just pop up to hosts and panelists from folks. It's a blue drop down right where it says to in the message section. Okay, and I see the question from Nick put into the Q&A. So looks like from Nick, you have a question that says, will you have rebates for fuel switching?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Nick. I think right now we're trying to explore what those programs, what those incentives may be as it relates to conversion or electrification. And that's really what part of this plan is trying to do, is trying to study what that conversion rate looks like, what that, I should say, what that the timing of electrification and the willingness for customers or the want for customers to transition. And then what we hope is that in the integrated system plan, we'll be able to detail out some of the programs we have related to electrification.
Okay, great. And sorry, I know I sound like a broken record, but just seeing more messages come in the chat only to hosts and panelists. So make sure you copy that or have any questions that you want everyone to see and put it to everyone. Ray, I'll put yours into everyone here. Okay. And then it looks like there's another question in the Q&A from Nick. Do you know how your NEM policy will change after 2025?
Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. That's something we're really closely monitoring. Based on the current policy, there's a certain threshold we would have to hit a certain percentage, where then we have to go back and relook at the net metering policy. So that's something we are still monitoring, and I think we may be able to follow up with a bit more information. Ray, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Brian, I just want to add for the whole group. So NEM is net energy metering, right? And this is for people who have rooftop solar and earn credits on their excess solar that they can apply to their bill later, right?
Mhm.
And the NEM policy that Nick is referring to, that's a state policy, right? We don't set that policy directly. The state sets it for us.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Nick.
Thanks for those clarifications. Yeah. Okay, we'll see if there's any other questions while we're doing that. And before we move on, I'll just read some of the responses to our waterfall earlier, just seeing how some folks said, when planning for clean energy, want to ensure that those who are economically challenged are not left behind, and we address energy sources during power outages. So that was one I thought might be good to share with all, because I saw that just for the hosts and panelists, as well as how to keep a home that you rent insulated when it's cold, so we can make sure that we're not wasting electricity. Those are great things that you're hoping to hear about tonight, or just in general from Puget Sound Energy. So thanks for sharing those. Not seeing any other questions come up, Brian, I'll go ahead and have us keep going and take us into the next part of the presentation.
Thank you, Annie. Okay, let's talk about priorities, because one of the things we want to do is level set a foundation for what are the things that are top of mind that are going to be core to how we develop this integrated system plan, and what are the core principles that we're going to use as we develop and analyze this plan along the way. So if we can go to the next slide, for us, safety and reliability are foundational, and doing this at the lowest cost as well is also going to be foundational. We want to be sure that we're putting a plan together with safety in mind. Is this a safe plan for our customers, for our region? Is it reliable? Is it going to help and improve reliability for customers? And are we doing this at the lowest reasonable cost for customers as well? So those are really core to us as we make this plan. Now, if we can go to the next slide. Now, there's a number of policies that have been enacted, and I touched on one of them earlier, but there's a couple others I want to briefly touch on, because these all really culminate to really drive the investments and really drive this clean energy future. The first one, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, I talked about that one earlier, CETA, related to increasing our electric supply to be cleaner and non-emitting. And then the Clean Buildings Act, which is focused on energy efficiency for buildings. Climate Commitment Act, or CCA, is focused on greenhouse gas emissions. The Clean Fuel Standard, which is focused on curbing pollution from transportation. And then 1589, a more recent bill that was passed, really focused on what we're talking about today here, which is that integration of the electric and the gas system. That bill really focused on us bringing those two pieces together. And so, as I mentioned, we have to consider these laws, these policies, and the intent behind them for this future, because they're going to have really significant impacts on all the different areas across our business. We can go to the next slide. So in order to meet these state goals or emissions reduction goals, it's going to require some significant investment. And we know that just based on the laws themselves and the policies. And we know that investment is going to directly impact your bills. It's going to directly impact customer bills and costs. But again, as we develop this plan, we're committed to keeping bills as low as possible while also balancing safety and reliability. We know this is going to be costly, and we hear your concerns. We know that some of you, or maybe all of you, are concerned about the rising cost of bills. And so I just want to reiterate, we are committed to keeping bills as low as possible, but also understanding that we're also trying to meet the state laws and the policies that are in place, and making sure that we keep energy reliable and safe for all customers as well. But if we can go to the next slide, because we know the impact of cost, we also want to let you know we're here to help, that there is support, that we have existing programs in place to really help you all, to really help customers with bills, with past due bill forgiveness and other assistance programs. And we have a number of other programs that are not just financial bill impact related, but really focus on energy demand. And so some of you may be familiar with some of the flex programs that we have out there for our demand response programming. You may be familiar with our community solar program as well. So we have a flurry of options out there that are really geared toward helping you both financially and on the energy demand side as well. And you'll see us talk more about these programs, sort of some of the flex programs, the distributed programs, a lot more in that integrated system plan. So again, our core principles: safety, reliability, and keeping bills as low as possible, but also making sure that we moving forward in this clean energy future based on the policy and the intent of the laws. Okay, I think might be the last slide. Oh, yep. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Okay, so over to Q&A. Looks like we've got one in the queue at least. So from Savannah, what about the elderly and disability people? It's hard enough. What other options can I get more information, please? Looks like maybe she wants more, they want more information regarding maybe some things for elderly and disabled folks.
Yeah, thank you for that, Savannah. One thing I will say that I did not mention, I should have mentioned early on when I was talking about the Clean Energy Transformation Act, is it is not just about moving towards a cleaner energy future, but we also need to be very intentional and deliberate about understanding the burdens and where customers can benefit, especially those who are our most marginalized or our most vulnerable customers. And so part of this process is understanding who our most vulnerable customers are, where are they, what are those areas where we can provide services or programs to really help. And so, Savannah, you provide a really good example of when we think about our highly impacted or vulnerable populations or customers within the deepest need, we think about that holistically when we create these programs. So it's about how can we create distributed energy resources, whether it be solar or storage, but also have an eye towards, well, how is someone on a fixed income going to be able to participate? Or how is someone with a disability going to be able to participate? Those things are top of mind as we create new programs or have existing programs as well. And so while we may not have a specific program for elderly and disabled people experiencing disability, that is something that it is also paramount in the CETA process. And so we are thinking about that as well. And so you'll see that in our previous clean energy implementation plans, and you'll see that as well in our integrated system plans in the future.
Thanks, Brian.
Annie,
And you got
could I?
heart. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to add a note, Silvana. I put a link in the chat to our bill discount rate page. There is a 3-question kind of quick survey that you can take there to see if you qualify for the bill discount rate program. That was really designed to be efficient and get you right to the answer. So I would encourage anyone on the call today to at least check through those boxes and see if you qualify. If you do, it can take you through some very simple steps to get you signed up. And if you have any questions, we'll put the customer care number in the chat also. If for some reason you have trouble online, you can reach out to customer care and they can get you signed up that way as well.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and I was just going to tell Brian, I saw some heart reactions during your response. I think people appreciated what you just shared. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Next question up, I have a question from Myrna. What is Flex program?
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Marina. Flex programs are the programs we consider, we call them demand response programs, but they are programs that are designed to reduce energy, typically during times where loads are really high on our system. And so a primary example could be a thermostat, where you can enroll in a program where You may get a notification that says, we're launching a flex event right now. Can you please turn down your thermostat if you're willing and able to? There are also areas where it's automated, where it will automatically turn thermostats down as well. But it's really about having a conversation or reaching out, notifying a customer, saying, if you could help, this would be a great time to help. Now, some of the programs are incentivized, meaning you do get an incentive for participating in them. And I think Ray may have sent a link in the chat that really distinguishes between the different programs that we have. So some of them they are incentivized. Others, customers just respond and participate through the notification. So that's really what those flex programs are.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, I have another question from Dennis. Is it possible to get time of use rates with net metering?
Okay, thank you, Dennis, for that question. So I sort of have to separate or break it apart because we have a time of use rate pilot right now, and it is a pilot, so it's in the early stages. So we haven't really explored the idea of joining the two together. That's something we'll have to go back and consider and think more about. But right now, I would say we just have the time of use pilot, so we're a little bit early in those stages of using the time of use rate process right now.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, and one last question here. Will there be discount programs or rebates for installing solar panels in the future?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Is it Jintong? Might be. I'm not sure though. I don't want to say it wrong though. So I will say that we're exploring a number of programs today, and I don't know if we have a link to some of those programs. I don't know that we have one currently where we offer rebates for installing panels, but that is something that we've heard from customers previously and wanting or looking for some of the incentives or rebates for some of the installations. So we may have to go back and dig a little bit and come back and send that out in the feedback report. But that is something we have heard before.
Okay, thanks for that, Brian. And then another question from Mai, is MetroFlex the part of Flex program?
Oh, thanks for the question, Mai. I do not know. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know if others behind the scenes know, but I don't.
Ryan, if it's the same MetroFlex, I'm thinking of that's a King County Metro program. And I would say no, they're not connected.
Okay.
Similar terminology and names though, for sure.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, clearly. A little confusing, I'm sure. All right, thanks,
Okay.
Ray.
Yeah.
And then saw there was one last question. I don't know if someone's going to answer that in the chat or if we should answer live before we move on, but we can always. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and thanks, Mai. Okay, so one last question. Can PSE help with determining if my house meets the prerequisites to switch from gas to electric?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Sharon. Yeah, so we do have home energy assessments, and I'm not sure if anyone's going to put it in the chat, but I believe we'll have to send that link out shortly about home energy assessments, and they can help provide support in switching from gas to electric.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Brian.
We'll get that in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah. Thanks, Dinah, for that question as well, related in the chat. So we'll get that link over there. All right, so that wraps us up for questions on this section. So Brian, I think we can keep going with the presentation. Natalie, if you want to go to the next slide, talking about planning for multiple futures. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for all the questions. Yeah, a lot of great questions. And I see some of the things in the chat about a lot of the programs. So it's just really encouraging to see you all are already thinking about this type of program, this type of program. I think that's just only gonna help make this integrated system plan even better. Okay, speaking of feedback, this is the chance where we've got a couple opportunities here where we want to hear from you. It'll come through in the slide, or rather in the chat, and I think Annie will spur those off. But now let's talk a bit about multiple futures. And I've said that once or twice, but really want to talk about and give you all some insight to how we're thinking about planning for multiple futures. So if we can go to the next slide. When we think about these multiple futures, we're thinking about what are the things that are outside of our control? What are the things that we can't control as a PSE? And we think about things like the economy, we think about weather, we think about policy regulations, customer behavior. There's just a number of factors, a number of things, futures that we can't really control, but we have to consider them, and we have to think about the risk and the opportunities that may come with these futures. And so that's why I say multiple futures, because we have to think about, well, what happens if the weather does this, or what happens if customers behave this way? This is where we're going to start talking about multiple futures and scenarios. But before we get there, I think this is an opportunity to hear from you. And if we can go to the next slide, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks, Brian. Yes, we'd love to hear from you. We have a couple slides like this for you to provide us with your feedback. So if you can go to your chat, not the Q&A, and make sure that the to says to everyone rather than not hosted panelists, to everyone. And we'd love you to just respond to this. What factors do you think are most likely to impact energy demand in the future? We'd love to see what your responses are to that. What factors do you think are most likely to impact energy demand in the future? Kim, yes, demands for air conditioning. Everybody wants it now. Yes. Well, maybe not right this second, just because it is pretty cold, but
It's cold.
they do want it now when it gets to be 115 this summer again, I'm sure. Warmer weather, more air conditioning. So air conditioning is top of people's minds tonight, which is funny given how rainy and chilly it is out right now. But good to get ahead of it. Electric cars, yep, yeah. Lots of EV car charging, so electric vehicle car charging, more air conditioning, lots of support for that tonight. Population growth, yep, a couple population growth ones. Heat, winters feel like they get colder each year, AC in the summers, electric vehicles, colder and hot weather, yeah, so the two extremes. More support for the AC, okay. Climate change and grid infrastructure strengthening. Yeah, great. These are great. Thank you so much for responding. Helpful to see. Yep, heat pumps, aging population, population growth and new toys. Assuming you mean EV, electric vehicles, or other toys, probably too. Make solar for rental apartments. Yes, great. Well, these are great responses. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for that, Aaron. You're right. There's a lot of love for AC. I guess we're all bracing for a really sunny summer. I know I am. EVs, I saw that. Large population growth. Yep, strengthening. Aging population. Solar for rental. Oh, new construction. Thank you. All right. These are really great to see here. Okay, we're gonna come back to those factors. If we can go to the next slide, because now I want to paint a picture of what I hope is an illustration that gives you a lens for how we're considering building these multiple futures. So if I could see you, I would tell everyone, raise your hand if you remember as a child going back to school clothing shopping, or if you remember doing it recently with a child of your own and closely related, right? And I'm sure a lot of us will raise our hand like, yep, I remember going back to school shopping at the outlet or wherever you're going to go. Right. Oh, see the thumbs up, the hand claps. Thank you. Thank you for the reactions. So let's go back then and remember when you're back to school shopping, there are a couple of things you had to consider, right? One was you had a limited budget, right? It wasn't a blank check. You weren't just walking in, getting everything in the store, right? You had a limited budget. So there's a set amount that you can spend, right? The other thing you had to think about when you're back to school clothing shopping is the weather is not always the same, meaning some days are going to be sunny, like the sunnier days we're all hoping for. Some days are going to be, you could have some snow here, right? But then there are going to be a lot of the days where it's going to be rainy. And so when you're back to school shopping, you have to think, okay, how can I think about my wardrobe, the clothes I need that are going to help me in the sunny days when it's really warm, in the snowy days when it's really cold, and in those days when it's rainy and I need something to keep me dry, right? And so you were really you were really shopping based on what you actually thought was going to happen, what was realistic, as opposed to a single future, right? So you weren't thinking, I'm only going to shop for the things that are going to help me when it's raining to keep me dry, or the things to keep me warm when it's really cold. You really had to think about the spectrum or the gamut of all these different scenarios or all these different multiple futures, right? And again, you got to do that with a limited budget, right? So let's go to the next slide. Now, when you did that shopping, you were thinking about all these different scenarios. You probably thought, well, I could probably mix and match some of this, right? Like maybe a sweater, I'll need that and it'll keep me warm. It might keep me dry, but maybe I'll throw in a t-shirt in case it gets a little too warm, right? Or maybe I get some boots that help with the winter time and keep my feet dry in the rain as well. And so you had to really think about how can I sort of mix and match different things that are going to cover me again across the full spectrum of those future scenarios, right? It's not necessarily about the optimal outcome, but really thinking about what's going to probable a probable future that will happen. So let's go to the next slide, and I hope that makes sense. I'm gonna tie it all together to what we're doing here. You all talked about some factors earlier, right? You all mentioned, I'm just read your list. You talked about air conditioning, you talked about warmer weather, you talked about EVs, you talked about solar, population growth, grid support. These are all factors that we are also considering, right? And you see those here. We're thinking about fuel prices. We're thinking about conservation. We're thinking about policy from the federal and state level. These are all things that we've got to consider in this future that we've got to study and analyze in this multiple future, right? So if we go to the next slide, now we're in the shoes I just put you in, right? And we're thinking, okay, if I have multiple futures coming up, it could be a future where there's really, really high electrification, meaning really high electric load growth, really high gas load reduction. So a lot of gas customers switching over to electric, right? And what that's going to do is then drive a lot of investments. So it's going to drive much higher investments in our electric system. Now, that's one future I could look at, but I could also look at a future where maybe electric load doesn't grow as much. Maybe customer behavior isn't as quick. Maybe the weather isn't as volatile as some of these other scenarios. Now, because of that slower electric growth, maybe some modest gas growth, which means we don't need as much investment into the electric system. But again, just like you were back to school shopping, where we were looking at what do I think is going to happen with a really sunny weather, or what do I think is going to happen with snowy, we have to think about what do we think is going to happen if electrification goes really, really high. But we also have to think about what happens if we don't have as much load growth or we don't have as much electrification. But we have to study those various futures because there may be a middle in there. Maybe it's sort of in between. And someone mentioned incentives or rebates for electrification. Maybe we have to study that scenario and see what type of investments that leads to as well. And so what we're trying to do is similar to the approach I walked you through with the back to school shopping is we're really testing different bookends, if you will, of what a future could look like. We don't know for certain what that future is going to be, but if we test the different bookends, if we look at the different scenarios, we think it's going to give us some insight to how we can put together a plan that covers the full spectrum of what could be. Meaning, we want to be able to have those, going back to those specific actions, those strategies and plans that are going to help cover us throughout these various scenarios, these various futures that we have here. All right. So let's go to the next slide. And I think, Annie, we've got this final question here for the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So another question for you all to respond to in the chat, and just a reminder to go ahead and send it to everyone, not hosts and panelists. What factors are most important to you when thinking about the future of our energy system? And I'll repeat that question again for you to respond to in the chat. What factors are most important to you when thinking about the future of our energy system? And I see energy conservation costs, clean energy, decreasing fossil fuel use, will we tier upgrade costs, reliability of the grid, reliable and clean, needs to support energy freedom, choice, and a high demand for clean energy, stability of the grid system again, better for the environment, lots of stability, and then of course cost, lots of reliability tonight as well. Increased cost for retired persons on fixed income. Yeah, these are really good things for us to be seeing in the chat. Thank you for sharing all. Thank you. Yes. And there's, yeah, a question in there. I don't know if that's more just a question to put out to all folks, or if you wanted that responded to, Dinah. But I see increased cost, more reliability. So yeah, lots of reliability and cost tonight, Brian.
Yeah, that's great. It really aligns with some of the priorities that we talked about earlier. So I'm really, really glad to see that. I just have to shout out happy people, happy electricity costs, and talk with the customer. I think that's a key part, right? Talking to customers throughout this process.
Yeah, more money saving comments. And Susan, thanks for that question. I don't know if you wanted to put that out to folks or have it responded to, but how do people living in rural areas become energy independent? More about impacts on environment, safety of alternative sources of energy, such as wind turbines and birds, what to do with the old turbines. Yeah, okay. Well, great things to consider. Brian, I'll turn it over to you to keep us going.
Okay, we'll do, Annie. Thank you so much. I think we go to the next slide, might be a Q&A slide. So let me just wrap us up here to go back to where we were. So first we talked about the clean energy transition. We talked about CETA. We talked about electric growth. We talked about all these impacts, all these things that we are seeing that really drove us towards this integrated system plan where we now need to think about our gas and electric system holistically, right? We need to understand those interactions between the two, right? And then we talked about the challenges and our foundational priorities. We talked about safety, reliability, and doing at the lowest cost, lowest reasonable cost for customers. And you all reiterated those priorities here as well. And so as we're building that integrated system plan, those are the foundational pieces that we're going to keep top of mind for us. And then we talked about how do we build the plan itself. And so we had a good conversation on those factors we need to consider. And we had a good conversation on creating those bookends, those multiple futures, so that we could better plan for and better understand what is the right mix and match of an integrated plan that'll help us get to get to a future that we may not know at the moment right now. So again, I really appreciate everyone and in your feedback in the chat and the questions. But this really just gives us an overview of how we're moving towards that integrated system plan for that clean energy future. All right. I think we can do questions, Ray, Annie.
Brian, can I add a note? I just put this
Okay.
in the chat, but a lot of folks have asked tonight about, energy efficiency improvements or upgrades to their home. PSE has a recommended energy professionals resource where you can search for energy professionals for your specific project. So I just put a link in the chat and just would encourage you all to take a look at that as you're looking for folks to help you with your projects.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Brian. Brian, I think people have not put in more questions yet into the Q&A, but we can give them a moment to do so. If folks have thought of any questions that they'd like to ask Brian, we are in the wrap-up part of tonight's presentation. We do have about 10 minutes left with just a few more slides that are more focused on resources. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A. And we'll give you just a few moments to do that. And thanks, Ray, for providing those resources, helpful in terms of responding to some of the folks' comments tonight. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions come in. So, I'm sure people are busy this evening trying to eat, trying to take care of their families, all that. And I did see one pop in. Right when I was about to transition us. It's okay though.
Yeah.
Might have just taken a minute for folks to think about what they wanted to say. So I'll give us a second there. Okay, so there's one question that says, where will the clean energy from Puget Sound Energy come from? Solar or wind?
Jintong, thank you for that question. It could be a mix. That's kind of the honest answer. When we think about clean, non-emitting resources, we think about solar, wind, we think about geothermal, we think about existing hydro, and not emitting would be nuclear. And so when we perform our studies, we're considering all of these different resources on the large scale and the small scale. And we've got to consider all these different resources in the process. And then we go through a what's called an RFP process to really look at specific projects that'll help us get there. So to answer your question, it could be a mix. It will be a mix of all these different resources because we've got a big hill to climb here. So it's an all-in approach. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and as soon as I said there weren't any questions, we got lots.
We got lots.
So
all right.
I'll try to rapid fire us through these so we can get through everything before 6:30. All right, so what might the impacts be with Bonneville Power Administration and the possibility of dam removal and reductions to their staff?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kim. That's something we are closely monitoring. As some of you may know, or Kim, you may know, BPA is a very close neighbor of ours, and we work directly with them on a lot of different areas. And so we are closely working alongside with them. They provide a lot of support in this clean energy future, whether it be transmission bills or some of the hydro dams themselves. And so I think we would just continue to work closely with them and sort of monitor what happens, whether it be impacts to staff or dam removals as well. Removing hydro obviously has an impact on some of our clean energy targets as well, and removing staff has an impact on a lot of the studies that get done, whether it be transmission related or interconnection related. Those are all going to have impacts on this clean energy future. So we've just got to continue to stay really connected with the team over there and work in partnership with them. But thanks for the question, Kim.
Thanks, Brian. I'll move us into our next question from Nick. Do you anticipate any more robust demand response programs like the OHM Connect in California, or is that not necessary because of our hydro resources?
So Nick, thanks for the question. I'm not familiar with Home Connect. I'd be curious to kind of know what that is. And maybe we can have someone. I think we sent a link to our demand response programs, but I don't know if we have anything close to it or if we have maybe something in the works. But as far as I know, I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay. Maybe we can respond to that in the meeting recap if others from PSC have an idea. Okay, so we'll keep going. I did see a question from Robin about resources for manufactured homes, and Ray went ahead and put the page from PSC's website regarding manufactured homes right into the chat. So hopefully that is helpful information. And then there is a question. Oh, this will be our last one, and then we'll move into wrap up. How will any federal policy changes affect your future planning?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Dennis. I think there's a couple areas. One I touched on earlier related to BPA, and we saw some of the impacts there on Bonneville. The other I think about is tax credits that could be related to some of the clean resources I talked about earlier through our RFP process, and obviously tariffs as well. These have impacts on the economics of these plants, these future wind or solar farms, or really any of those facilities for the materials and for that supply chain. So I think those are probably the two that are top of mind. I do want to make a point that the goals, the state goals are state, the policies are state goals, right? So CETA 1589, those are all state driven. And so we continue to abide and comply with the state laws. But we recognize there's going to be some effects from the federal side as well. I should also mention there are impacts to how we may look at. I talked earlier about making sure we're thinking about our most vulnerable populations and our most disadvantaged communities. You know, there is connection. I mean, we've looked at some literature from the federal level as well, and so change in that policy may also impact what we do here. But again, what we're doing is state policy, it's state law, and so we'll continue to abide with that. So thanks for that question. Who was that?
It got answered. I think that was here. All right, go all the way to the bottom.
Dennis. Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah. It gets
So
moved and then you can't find it. So it's
so
like, okay,
questions.
where to go?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have 3 minutes left. So I just want to thank Brian so much for being here tonight, presenting this information and giving such great, thoughtful responses back to everyone and everyone else for their thoughtful questions and engagement. We do have a couple more resource slides. Brian, do you want to breeze through those and then we'll wrap up?
Let's do that. So I didn't mention this earlier, but I wanted to take some time to talk about how you can continue to stay involved. You all are taking a really great step here, right? You're at the webinar. There is another group called the Resource Planning Advisory Group. This is a more technical group. And so you just heard me talk about future, multiple futures and scenarios. That technical group really gets into the details. And so if you're interested, you can always join the YouTube channel and listen in on that meeting. We have a number of other advisory groups. We have an equity advisory group and a conservation resources advisory group. But the equity advisory group and the RPAG are the two that are public. And then also visit our website. You can join our email list if you're not already on there. And then one thing I also didn't mention is that we will have a draft integrated system plan that comes out later on towards the end of next year as well. And so that's a really good opportunity where we're looking for you all to read that plan, to say, maybe I really like this, or maybe we can tweak this, but to really get your feedback once you see the plan, right? Once you get the document, it's a lot easier to sort of have that feedback there. And so that'll be another really good opportunity then. And of course, we'll do more public webinars in the future. All right, next slide, please. All right. And then we touched on these, I think we touched on a number of these programs. So I talked earlier about how you can participate now. And earlier we talked about some of the bill assistance. I talked about flex programs. There's weatherization, there's energy efficiency, there's customer rebate programs. And so just know that there are other programs out there currently, right? That can really help you today, whether it be bill related or on the energy demand side as well.
Great. And so Brian, are we good with, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
You've
yeah,
got one
sorry.
more slide.
Oh, sorry, we got one more slide. And this is just a list of some of the contact information. If you have any follow-up questions, there's a feedback form as well. If you have some questions or comments you want to make later on. And of course, subscribe to the email list. That's a really great way to stay up to date with what's going on as we build this integrated system plan. And we'll have updates posted on our website as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, Brian. Thanks to everyone else tonight. You can go to the next slide, Natalie. And just as we wrap up, please remember to stay connected. Feel free to reach out if you have any follow-up thoughts or ideas. We want to make sure you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And right before you do, we have a end of meeting survey. So when you exit tonight's webinar, there will be a poll. It takes just a few moments to fill out. It really helps us figure out how we're going to do our next set of webinars in the future. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete that before you go into the rest of your evening, we'd greatly appreciate that. And then just remember, tonight's session is recorded. You can watch it anytime you'd like on the YouTube channel. And just thank you again for all of your time in the evening, taking away from somewhere else to be here with us tonight, and all your thoughtful questions and engagement. Hope to see you again, and have a wonderful evening, folks. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.